My name's Peter Alfandary. I'm a bit of a strange Brit because I had an entirely French education and I don't know what I feel except I did cry the day of the referendum result. I'm also very involved with the French Chamber of Commerce, of which I'm the Senior Vice President, and so I'm, like Olivier Morel said this morning, I still think I'm in a nightmare, and I still hope to wake up from it, but unfortunately I don't think I'm going to wake up from this one. I'd like to kick off by sort of giving a few stats and then maybe getting your comments, if I may. There's a lot of anecdotal stuff going on at the moment about people leaving, people not leaving, companies moving, companies not moving. But just looking at some names, we all know them: Microsoft, EasyJet, Diageo, Goldman Sachs, Deutsche Bank. Unilever's a question mark, I agree. Although if I were on Unilever's board, given that they're an Anglo-Dutch company, I would probably move now, my headquarters, back to Holland rather than stay here, which is a terrible thing to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. There was also a very interesting report I read recently from the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply, who estimate that 63% of EU companies plan to move some of their supply chain out of the UK as a result of Brexit. The Japanese ambassador said his words to Theresa May recently: "We hear rumors about 10,000 city jobs. We have a weak pound." The word uncertainty comes to mind a lot. What I'd like to do is ask you, Andrew, if I may, to give a flavor, because your business is movement, people and companies. Can you share some views? What are you seeing? What are you feeling?
Yeah, sure. So I work for a company, AGS Group, and we specialise in helping companies to relocate their staff in and out of the country. Typically, there's always a flow of traffic between all the countries for us to move people. But with Brexit and what's happening recently is the interest from companies that are coming to us, not necessarily moving now, but they want to find out the implications if we move all of our staff at some stage into these areas. What's that going to be like, and how's that going to feel? So we've definitely seen an increase on the number of corporate companies that are coming to us now for advice on how to relocate to a different country. Some of the things that we are seeing is a lot of the companies now are having, well, we used to deal with the mobility teams and the talent teams. We're now dealing with Brexit managers as well. So companies are setting up Brexit managers within their organisation to actually deal with this whole situation. But again, although they're getting ready for it, there's not a lot of commitment at this moment, but you only have to look at the number of new headquarters being built in different countries for these big organisations that you mentioned. You can see already that it's going to happen at some stage.
Yes, and the time cycle in business isn't short. I mean, you need to advance plan. Yep. I mean, I presume everybody, your clients, are particularly advanced planning for 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 18 months ahead.
Yep.
You mentioned to me an increase. You've seen an increase probably of around 40% of inquiries.
About 40% of the inquiries have increased. The other thing as well is the companies that are now looking to move into these areas and setting up these projects. There's lots of things that companies need to be aware of. If you're going to what we call a group move, there's a company at the moment that are looking to go into Amsterdam, and they're looking to move 600 people, right? Which is a huge amount of people to move into Amsterdam. Now, logistically, how does that work? Because if you're moving 600 families into Amsterdam area, we help to find accommodation and find housing, etc., for those people. But also, you've got to find schools for those 600. So that's just one company. But if you have like 5 or 6 companies all doing this at the same time into that area, what you'll find is the cost of living in those areas will definitely go up. Property prices will go up. Availability for schools will go up. So the downside of companies also looking to leave is, are you going to lose your pool of talent? Because I think there's lots of different things you need to look here. Is talent is going to be critical, and I think we're going to see a huge change in the next few years of where the talent all sits. Not everyone will want to go, but those that do go, are they going to like where they're going to because it's great for the company, but is it great for the actual employees in that side?
A kick-off remark from you, Patricia. What's your gut reaction to this? Because you've been in this world for so long now, and you're so you're so. I mean, in terms of Brexit.
You mean in terms of Brexit?
I don't mean it in other terms.
Thank you. Well, actually, it's fascinating to see how things are changing. I remember only a few years ago, I was organising events in Paris, trying to lure entrepreneurs here in the UK. And in fact, some of them are here today, who did make that move and who decided to set up their headquarters.
Was that what's called your red carpet day?
It was called the red carpet day. And do you know why it was called the red carpet day?
Tell me.
Because of David Cameron saying,
yes,
we will roll out the red carpet to the French entrepreneurs. If you do not want them, we will have them. And so that was the idea. It was called Red Carpet Day, and it was actually carried out and put together in a place called Le Tapis Rouge in Paris. So it was very successful. And the reason why people then were actually companies were keen to come to the UK was because they felt that, one, it was easy to do business. It was an opening to the whole world, because the UK, of course, was open to the whole world, not just to Europe. And it was very simple to set up your business in terms of, within minutes you could actually open a company. You didn't have to go through all the French administration, and it was very, very simple. And on top of that, they could actually raise cash very quickly as well if they wanted to. So that was very important for them. And now, what we're hearing from these people who actually came, they're thinking about going the other way. Not automatically back to France, but actually looking at other countries in the EU, and because they feel that, one, the climate has changed, and I don't want to go on for too long, but the climate has changed. They don't feel welcome anymore. And that actually is a very important point. When you're doing business, you want to feel that you are secure and that you know what's going to happen next. And at this stage, they don't know that.
I mean, I think that this uncertainty point is a huge one. What about, if we look at this in terms of, in every situation, there's always the push and there's always the pull. I think the push away we all know about. Do you also see that there may be a pullback here? I mean, you have 94 countries you deal with.
We're in 94 countries ourselves, and we do see a lot, not just companies leaving, but we've got a lot of interest in companies coming in. But it's interesting the sort of backgrounds. So some large US pharmaceutical companies are looking at coming to the UK at the moment. And we know that because they come to us to find out information. That's one area. Retail as well is looking like it's on the up to come back into the UK, which I have no idea why, but these are the companies we're starting to see take more interest.
More interest than pre-Brexit, or just
I would say
interest in the context of Brexit?
I think it's in the context of Brexit. I think at this stage now, there is that uncertainty, but I do think a lot of people see it as an opportunity.
Because of the weak pound?
Possibly, yeah.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Possibly. Patricia, I wanted to, and actually both of you, to go on to look at this psychological aspect, because there's a lovely French expression, c'est le ton qui fait la musique, which I suppose it's not what you say, it's the way you say it. And I feel that, personally, that Theresa May missed an extraordinary opportunity in setting the tone, which she could have done months ago by immediately announcing that every European national was welcome here and would stay. and have rights. If she had taken the initiative, I believe it would have set a completely different tone for the negotiations. That's my view. It may not be shared by everybody, but I think it was a huge opportunity missed. I think it's something to do with the fact that culturally we're very transactional, and the vision thing Brits aren't good at. And I think you're seeing that at the moment in the negotiations. But what I'd like to just explore with you is this question of atmosphere, because certainly I've heard this time and time again, this feeling of not being welcome. Do you think that's an important aspect in all of this? Because
I think it is actually a very important aspect, because if you, as I said earlier, if you are going to come to a country, for instance, for work, you want to feel welcome. And that was actually very much something that was happening before. I mean, all the Europeans I know certainly came to the UK because they felt that they were welcome, that everything was possible, that if they wanted to work, they could work. And if they wanted to set up their families, they could do it, and that people were not actually going to judge them. They don't feel that anymore. I mean, obviously, the tabloids are very much, they have something to do with that, of course. I mean, we know what we read in the mail regularly, and that's pretty bad. But more importantly, I think that we used to have a pool of Europeans that would come and go as well. But what we are getting, and I know as a company myself, we are not getting the young people anymore. They're not coming as much as they used to come because they don't see the UK with the same attraction. I mean, they don't see it as a very...
So you're getting less applications? I mean, for example, in your business, the number of applications is what?
The number of applications has dropped dramatically. We used to get hundreds of applications. We're now really, it's like a trickle. I mean, literally, we hardly have anything. So we actually have to go and get people to come. It's a very weird situation. I think that the young are looking at other countries. I mean, they're looking at Germany, they're looking at Dublin. I mean, I was there very recently, and in fact, people are talking about the fact that the price of accommodation has gone through the roof. You can't find places in schools. That's mostly because people are actually going to Dublin instead of coming to London. It's actually quite scary, really, when you see that.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Dublin. I was recently in a trade delegation to Dublin, and I had to give a couple of talks. And something very poignant I read. James Joyce in 1920, in one of his plays, said something extraordinary. He said, "If Ireland wants to become truly Irish, she must first become European." And I quoted that, and I said that I woke up in Dublin that morning, and of course Brexit was the main discussion on many of the events that I was at, and I said I woke up with a sense of poignancy, and that poignancy was that I woke up in Dublin feeling in a country that was deeply, deeply aware of its identity, and yet deeply European. And I said it was a tragedy that we have been unable to combine that feeling of strong identity with that feeling of being European as well. But I thought it was an extremely prescient thing that he said, and a very unusual thing. This talent point, is it something that you're sort of also aware of? Do you feel it? Do you, even if it's anecdotally, I mean, when you're talking to people about them coming here or leaving?
I think for us is we give advice to companies about their policies, global policies.
Right.
If you're sending someone on an assignment, the last thing you want to do is invest in them and then find they go and work for the competition when they arrive to their new destination. So it's all about retaining your talent and how to do that. So from our perspective, we've always been talking to companies about these type of things. It's not coming up in the Brexit talk so much. Which I find strange because if you're going to do these big, are you leaving or you're not? You should be worried about your talent. I do think not everyone is going to go with the way the company wants it to go. So it's something that they should be investing more in at the moment of how do they retain that talent.
And you're mainly dealing, of course, with big companies. I mean, one of the areas, of course, where I think we're going to see an interesting development is the hospitality industry. because there is a big one
Well,
from the point of view of talent.
QE2, for instance, 60% of their staff are from the EU.
Here,
Yes.
60%.
Yes.
60% is a serious percentage.
It's serious. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I came across this a couple of times. Again, it was anecdotal, but at least one CEO I was speaking to, who's lived in this country for a while, it was a few days after Brexit, was standing on the tube with his kids and was speaking French, and was told by one person, "Why don't you all go home? Brexit has now happened." And I find that, and he said to me that for the very first time in many years, he had had that feeling of disquiet, of being unsettled, and of not feeling welcome. And I have to say that probably upset me more than anything that I'd heard, because this was somebody who speaks perfect English, profoundly European, a huge employer in this country, and that was very upsetting. Have you had any of those anecdotal things? I mean, we're talking about companies leaving, but I think you can't separate companies from individuals.
No.
It's too easy to say a company is leaving. At the end of the day, every corporation is made up of human beings.
Well, I think we're going to get a lot of testimonies today about the type of comments that have been made to people similar to the ones you've just mentioned. And we have actually, as a company, experienced it as well. Of course, our name is France in London, so that didn't help. So we did actually have a lot of calls just after Brexit saying, "You are going now." Okay, well, that was very nice. But it was actually quite interesting to have that, because, of course, we are promoting France here in the UK and everything that is French. But going back to the businesses that are suffering the most, I mean, I was talking to Raymond Blanc, as you know very well. Raymond was saying that he was also having problems recruiting at the moment because he needs staff. And of course, restaurants are desperate for Europeans, to come and work. And the NHS is going to find it extremely hard, and we all know that. And in fact, we're going to have a talk about it today as well. So it's across the board. I think you can't go around London without bumping into someone that is not European, and you hear so many different languages being spoken as well.
Wouldn't it be an extraordinary statement, I'm sure it's been thought of by many people, to have a day of strike action by everybody who is an EU national working in this country?
There has been one.
There has been one.
It was called A Day Without Us.
Right.
But not enough. Yes.
Let me throw it open to questions, because, I mean, we're talking about companies, we're talking about people. Any anecdotes, any hard evidence here? Anybody want to sort of contribute or ask any questions? Because, I mean, clearly this is a big issue. Yes, there's one at the back there. If we could have a microphone there. Thank you.
No, hold on, I'm coming.
If you could perhaps say where you're from, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm originally French, but now also British, and I've been working in this country for about 20 years. I run a business, and I'm looking at should I stay or should I go? That was a very topical question for me. And I'm just wondering, apart from those big groups that you're describing, perhaps wanting to move to Amsterdam or elsewhere, are you getting a sense of small businesses looking at alternative ways of trading with Europe, perhaps through franchises or through other structures that do not involve a physical move?
I think that actually is going to be covered by Fabien just after this session, where he's going to explain to you how things can be structured so that they don't move, especially in the digital age. I mean, there are ways of doing it. As far as I'm concerned, I've seen smaller businesses. For instance, there was a company making T-shirts that was actually making all the T-shirts here in the UK, but most of their clients were actually all across the EU, and they've now moved to Portugal because it was actually they were afraid that they were going to have problems getting their T-shirts into the rest of the EU after Brexit. So that's just one example.
In the middle there.
Hello, Theo Bourgerie from the London School of Economics. I'm French as well. This question goes to Andrew. You've mentioned that you've seen some US pharmaceutical firms coming to the UK. I wonder if you have a broad understanding of industry in terms of looking at industries, which ones are most likely, in your experience and what you've been seeing for the past 2 years, which industries are most likely to pool, as you said, and which industries are most likely to sort of remain in the UK when they were expecting to export? Do we have industry trends there?
Yeah. So looking to leave at the moment is obviously, I think everyone will notice the big financial companies. They're looking to maybe head more into Ireland as such, but also some large insurance companies as well, looking to move more towards the France, etc. And airlines, obviously, moving out to Austria, etc. Coming in to the country, there's some large, like I say, pharmaceutical companies that are US-based companies looking at us right now. Retail companies, again, coming in via the States. So it does show there's a dynamics of, not European countries as such coming in, more outside of Europe that are looking at us. And also some smaller banks from Asia as well, which is interesting because if you think about the larger banks that are looking to leave, and all of a sudden we're seeing smaller ones look at us. So maybe that's the change that you'll see in the next 5-10 years. Maybe we'll be at a different bank in the high street.
To what extent do we feel, and do you feel because of your business, that there is a London effect here? I mean, are you mainly focusing on London, or are you also seeing the same trends outside London, whether it's push or pull?
So I suppose we are looking at London here because, I mean, we deal with, like I say, we're in 94 countries in total. So we're helping companies all over the world, not just into Europe, etc. But for London, the increase is definitely there of companies looking to leave. Right. Definitely.
Yeah. I think there's one question here at the front and one at the back. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm actually from Dublin, so I do work with the French. I'm the president of the UFE in Ireland. You did want some anecdotes. I do have plenty of anecdotes where even people in planes not speaking English, as soon as they landed in London, were told, look, it's time for you to go. However, many of my best friends are in the UK, and maybe to balance, I'd like to say that all the European British, all the British that have always been European, have been more so since the vote, have been more welcoming, have been more open. And my disappointment was actually in Paris when at the Gare du Nord, someone, a English person, someone coming from London on the Eurostar, went to the tourist office and there was no one to speak English to that person. I was very surprised that on the other side of the channel, there's actually less welcome for people coming from the UK. So I'm hoping there'll be a balance. I'm hoping this whole situation where people feel uncomfortable with each other will start calming down. I think there's a lot of emotions. And Ireland is a good place. There's no reason why people shouldn't move to Ireland. I mean, you guys are all welcome. So hopefully I will see you next time you come to Dublin.
But I think, if I may say on that note, that assuming we have a hard Brexit, I think we, who are hopefully in this room like-minded people, we're going to have to work even harder. And those of us who are Brits, like I am, we're going to have to really work hard, because the hard work will happen after that. And the efforts that we will need to make to combat the rubbish that we've heard, the fascist press that we've seen and that we see have had huge effects in this country, I think will be even greater. And I think the onus, and I would talk to my fellow Brits here, we have to work very hard, and we have to combat exactly those issues that you've raised. Two questions, one at the back there, that was the first one. Huh? Okay. And then we'll take one more, and then I will wrap up.
Hello, I've got dual nationality. I'm French and British, and I'm lucky enough to be living in London, which is a very prosperous part of the UK. Now, my question is it not a bad idea to let part of the UK rot in poverty when sociologists and economists know that it's fertile ground for xenophobic and reactionary ideas?
That's a big one. It's a big one. I don't know who wants to answer it. I mean, clearly, if we look at the demographics of the vote, I think that goes to your question to a great extent. And what we're seeing, I think what we're seeing throughout Europe at the moment is inherent in your question as well. I think that the gap between the haves and the have-nots in 2018 throughout Europe is sufficiently large to give rise to the kind of effects that we're seeing in Hungary, in Poland, in Italy, we've seen in this country. So I think your question is a huge question. It's to do with globalization, it's to do with a variety of other things. But yes, I can only agree with you that to the extent that is it material in this discussion, it has to be material, critically material. And it's something that no government has addressed yet anywhere in Europe successfully, in my opinion. I think, have we got time for one more question?
I would just say one thing,
I'm
though.
sorry.
Boris Johnson, when he was mayor of London, wanted to make London independent, an independent city. So that was actually quite an interesting...
A final question here, and then we are going to have to wrap up.
Karl Schoenfeld, I'm a German passport holder living in Oxfordshire, Snowy Oxfordshire these days. I had an experience about a year ago flying from France back into Heathrow, where Air France asked me to fill in a landing card. And of course I protested as gently as I could with all the diplomacy I acquired 30 years in this country. And Air France later apologized. But the question resulting from this is very much in how far we'll have to look at the legal situation and our rights as they develop. But isn't there a much more worrying thicket of misunderstandings and miseducation and so on, because we can have rights as much as we may have, but if we have to sort of enforce them at every step, business-wise, in terms of living and so on, isn't that the much bigger worry?
Yeah.
Sorry, do you want to answer that one? I was going to say it's a huge problem because, of course, not everybody knows what everybody's right is, or are, sorry. And, I mean, we've heard stories where bank accounts were refused to Europeans, for instance, and not because the banks wanted to do that, but because the staff were badly briefed. And they don't know, so just in case, because they don't know, they will go the hard way instead of going the soft way. Because they don't want to be put in a difficult situation.
I think on that note, we are going to have to wrap up. But thank you very much, and thank you to my two speakers.